Today we continue our celebration of remembering Srila Prabhupada. It's a 3-day nectar celebration, and today is the icing on the cake with the cherry on top. We have His Grace Srutakirti Prabhu. And all of you know who Srutakirti Prabhu is, so he doesn't need any introductions. He served Srila Prabhupada very intimately for a long time, and he's also the author of the best-selling book in ISKCON, What is the Difficulty? Incredibly sweet memoirs. And I also like to welcome His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami Maharaj and all the other devotees who have joined this evening. And without any further ado, we'll pass it on to His Grace Srutakirti Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Krishna, thank you. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Tinamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharnini Visesas Sanyavadi Paskachade Satani Panchakopa Tirubhishcha Kripa Sindhu Vachapati Tanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, as I said, we're here in Vrindavan at Krishna Balaram Mandir, and of course, we've just observed Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day here. So just yesterday, the day before yesterday, the day before yesterday. Vrindavan's a very special place. Of course, I don't know if any of you have been watching some of the videos I put on. We're not very locked down here at Krishna Balaram Mandir. Temple is packed every day now during Kartik, and somehow or other we're trying to manage. Most of us wear masks most of the time. Social distancing is something that doesn't exist. I wrote a little something you could relate to, you sir. I said, they don't know who this Mr. Social distancing is, this Mr. Singh. They don't know Mr. Singh here in India. So, but everything is going on very nicely. So I was speaking a bit during Srila Prabhupada's disappearance. Panchagoda asked me to say something, and I was thinking that since today we're talking about compassion, Srila Prabhupada's compassion, how Prabhupada establishing ISKCON, now we know in ISKCON we have a lot of Vaishnava care society springing up here in Vrindavan. More and more we're trying to make the place available for so many people that are coming later on in life, some literally preparing to die. So it's very important to take care of the devotees. But what I realized, and especially in being with Srila Prabhupada for some time, was his whole society was establishing Vaishnava care. It's what he did. Establishing ISKCON was to care for everyone, to take care of all of us. And in particular, of course, his disciples, his followers, when they came, Prabhupada was the most caring person. And I was the recipient of that so many times, seeing how important it was that we took care of one another. And no one was more concerned or better at it than Prabhupada himself. From the very beginning, he would say in his own words how he was literally cooking for everyone, distributing the prasadam to everyone. So from the very beginning, he was training. Everything he did was training us up. And hopefully more and more will understand that this ISKCON society is one big family, very big family, but it is a family. And the more we see it that way, the more we can help one another, and the more we can advance ourselves in Krishna consciousness. One of the very first questions I ever asked Srila Prabhupada was was one of my best questions. Over the time I was with him, and not that it was a good thing, but I never asked him very many questions. I was very quiet and just went about, did my service. I thought that was my duty in some respects, was to more or less be invisible. Prabhupada told me, myself, he said, first class servant he does without being asked. So to me, it means You just want to do your business, and like I said, basically be invisible. My walking was quiet, everything was quiet as I tried to conduct my service. And I joined them, of course, 1972, just at the end of the Janmashtami festival in New Vrindavan. And from that time, even before that time, Prabhupada was planning. He had written letters to Guru Das. He had his plan, go to Vrindavan for Kartik. So this was 1972. So this was the first time since leaving for America that Prabhupada was going to spend the entire month of Kartik in Vrindavan. And on the plane, one of the flights on the plane, I would be sitting beside him. And he said to me, so he said, we're going to Vrindavan. He said, we'll be there for Kartik. Kartik, I didn't even know what this month was, this month of Kartik at that time. I was in the temple for just over a year. And he said, you'll speak from Nectar of Devotion. He said, you'll read. He said, and I'll stop you at time and make comments. I said, yes, Prabhupada. So this was very much on his mind, what he was going to do. And then we traveled a little further. Prabhupada went from Pittsburgh to Dallas, then to Los Angeles, and then to Hawaii. And then he was in Asia. I believe it was Bangkok, where Burjan was there. So Burjan, he would come every day. Prabhupada was staying in a hotel room there. So of course, there was no temple. There were no Indian families where he could stay. It was very rare. Prabhupada didn't like at all staying in hotels. He always wanted to stay in his place, even before the construction was completed, just like in Vrindavan, just like in Juhu. If he had his own place, that's where he would stay. But here he was staying in the hotel. And Burjan was there, of course, very early disciple of Srila Prabhupada. Prabhupada sent to Asia. And he would sit in front of Prabhupada and they would converse sometimes. And I was behind Prabhupada giving him massaging his back. And Prabhupada looking at Burjan, and he said, my godbrothers, they criticize me because I've allowed women into the temple. He said, but because of that adjustment, he said, we're successful. He said, when he went to America, he said he studied the Westerners, he studied for a year. He said he just watched. Prabhupada was always studying, always observing, always saw everything. And one thing I noticed while I was with him, he always saw everything that was going on around him. He knew who was talking to who. He knew everything that was going on. He knew how many chapatis someone was eating. He could tell you numbers. You would think he was just sitting there conversing, but everything he understood. So he said, because I've made that adjustment, we've been successful. He said, but they criticize me. So he's understanding. He's going back to India, back to Vrindavan. He's going to be initiating. Prabhupada had a initiation ceremony. He initiated first initiation. He gave Brahmin initiation. He made sannyasis there in Vrindavan while he was there. But he understood their mentality. And he said, but in India, he said, at their temples, he says, who goes? He says, they have Gaur Purnima. He says, all they have in Mayapur is women going to the temple, widows going to the temple. He said, but me, they criticize. Now I'm behind him. I've just been with him now for maybe 2 weeks, not even 2 weeks. And I'm massaging and I'm thinking, and I said, because I made that adjustment. So I said, Prabhupada, I said, what is the difference between making an adjustment, changing a principle? And then it got very quiet. Sometimes it seems very long. Maybe it was a few seconds, maybe a minute. And then he said, that requires a little intelligence. But this is from the very beginning. This is what Srila Prabhupada did. He understood exactly how to spread Krishna consciousness all around the world. And it was by making it available to everyone, not just as in India. And to this day, India has its way. We know here in Vrindavan, you can see it very strongly. In other places, the women have their place. But Prabhupada gave them a place everywhere when he went to the West. One of our first head pujaris, one of our first instructing pujaris was Shilavati. This was in New Dwarka. When I joined Prabhupada, from the time I joined him, 1972, 1973, New Dwarka was considered it was the headquarters. It was ISKCON headquarters. And Prabhupada would have pujaris come from other places to study under Shilavati. So, and in Calcutta, of course, Mother Narayani, she was pujari there for perhaps 20 years or so. So Prabhupada opened up everything as well to the ladies in ISKCON. We wanted to talk some about Prabhupada's compassion. I say very easy, you can see Prabhupada's compassion because I'm still here somehow or other. He's giving me the opportunity to speak. He's given me the opportunity to do service here in the temple in Vrindavan. So Prabhupada's compassion has no limits. But I saw very specific cases, how much Prabhupada cared for his disciples. He always saw what service they did. One thing I've been saying recently was, when you went to see Prabhupada, you would go into his room, and different devotee, the temple presidents, the GBC, whoever it was, book distributors. Prabhupada didn't ask you, are you chanting your rounds? How many rounds are you chanting? Are you following the principles? But he might just very well ask you, what are you doing? What are you doing? How are you helping me? This was what Prabhupada saw. He saw what his disciples were doing, how they helped open up temples, how they were distributing his books. These things gave Prabhupada great pleasure. And it was in 1975. Some of you may know the history, Hawaii, from the very beginning. Hawaii's always had a very shaky history. It was opened up originally by Gaurasundar and his wife, Govinda Dasi, who in 1967, they were personally serving Srila Prabhupada. Again, Govinda Dasi, at that early days, even while he was still being called Swamiji, she was doing all kinds of personal service for Prabhupada. And then she even seen Prabhupada getting massage. So she, even though she had no ability to do it, she asked, can I give massage? Prabhupada said, no, that's not possible. He said, that can't happen. So there was some time, they arrived there, maybe 1970, 1969, Prabhupada sent them to Hawaii. So 1970, of course, they have a temple. One devotee had given money for a down payment. Gaurasundar purchased a temple, I believe McKinley Street Temple. And a couple years later, everything just disbanded. He literally sold the temple. The devotee who had given the down payment, he gave him his money back, and the rest of the money he took. And he went to one of the other Hawaiian islands. They're all very close chains, 7 islands or so. And he opened up his own, he bought a property, not ISKCON property, he just went completely off on his own. So he just left everything. Prabhupada was, of course, very upset. He even wrote about, they've abandoned Tulsi Devi. Of course, we know Govinda Dasi established Tulsi Devi in the West from the seeds right there in Hawaii, where she flourishes to this day. But Prabhupada, of course, was very upset. So 1974, of course, our Ambarish Prabhu, he purchased a temple there, That temple is still there, 51 Koala Way. And Prabhupada, he purchased it literally for Prabhupada to have a nice place to do translating work. That was his foremost reason for getting that temple for Srila Prabhupada. And it was a beautiful place. Prabhupada said there were two places in the world. He said his two favorite places in the world were Hawaii and Juhu. And he said the reason for that was they had dab, coconuts. Prabhupada very much liked his coconut water. The other day we brought out from Prabhupada's room. Some things are very rarely seen in Prabhupada's room. They're kept under lock and key. His padikas in silver, his compact, which is in gold, and he has a gold straw. He was given a golden straw, which that would sit in his white bag. There are many rumors about what was in this white bag. I've heard some, just in the last month, some very crazy stories of what was in the white bag. But mainly, of course, his BBT bank book was in there, his Guru Dakshin, as he would get it, his passports. These were the things that were in his white bag, and many things from his desk, including his mirror, compact mirror, his silver tilak set, chandan set, and this gold straw. So these were seen by a few devotees the other day. It was a great pleasure seeing Prabhupada's paraphernalia. So anyway, in Hawaii, there at Koala Way, Prabhupada was staying there. This was 1975. Now at that time, Gursundar had been on this other island. He had his own little community going. It was completely separate from ISKCON. Hadn't had any contact with Srila Prabhupada since he left. But Prabhupada wanted to see him. And at that time, Guru Kripa Maharaj, Guru Kripa, he was the GBC there in Hawaii. And ISKCON, we also had a farm on the Big Island. It was called the Big Island. The island itself is called Hawaii. The island with the temples called Oahu. But anyway, Prabhupada said, let's go to the temple. I want to see the farm on the Big Island. And it was the one time while I was Prabhupada's servant that I didn't get to travel with him. He was just going to go for one day, and Guru Kripa decided he wanted Prabhupada for himself. So he didn't get me a ticket to travel to the Big Island. Anyway, it was it's a very quick flight, like half an hour. So they get there to the Big Island. And as soon as Prabhupada gets there, he said, I want to see Gursundar. So who can imagine what Prabhupada's going to say to this? He literally sold the temple, took the money for himself. And although they tried to make connection with Gursundar, it didn't happen. And then Guru Kripa said, you want to go see our ISKCON farm? Prabhupada said, no. He literally flew there. He flew there to the island to see Gursundar, his disciple Gursundar, who had taken the money and sold the temple. What a terrible thing. So then they get back that very day. He flew back that afternoon, get back to the temple, and Prabhupada stayed there for, I think, over a month. He went to Hawaii. He visited Hawaii, I believe, 9 times over the course of the years, and he stayed there almost 4 months altogether. It was a place he liked very much. It was very conducive, very nice place to do his translating work, very good for his health. So one day I'm massaging Srila Prabhupada, and it's in his sitting room. Well, sitting room in Hawaii was his sitting room, his bed, it was his room. So who should walk into the room? It's Gursundar. And now, of course, he has long hairs, he has a beard. And Gursundar was a Scorpio rising, a very intense look, very deep eyes. And he came, and Prabhupada, of course, sees him and welcomed him. and he just comes and he sits down. Again, I'm behind Srila Prabhupada. Most of the massage was behind Prabhupada because mainly it was his head and his back. Everything else would go on, but you would spend a lot of time massaging Srila Prabhupada's back. So I'm behind Prabhupada, always, my hands are always moving. Massage means your hands are always moving on Srila Prabhupada's body. And Gursundar sits down, and Prabhupada looks at him, and he said, "What did I do?" He said, "What offense have I committed?" He said, "That caused you to leave." And Gursundar is not saying anything. He's just looking at Prabhupada. It was very peculiar. He seemed very peculiar. And Prabhupada kept saying, "What have I done?" He said, "What can I do so that you come back to us?" He said, what offense have I made? He said, "If I've done some offense," he said, "what is it that I've done?" He had tears in his eyes. Didn't say anything about the temple, the money, none of this mattered. He just saw his disciple who had done all this service. And he kept saying, "What offense have I made?" Guru Kripa happened to be on the other side of the door of his room, also listening in. And he didn't say anything. Sundar didn't say anything. He just, with those deep set eyes, he just kept looking at Prabhupada. And finally, Prabhupada had tears, literally had tears in his eyes. And he said, "Okay," he said. And Gursundar just got up and he left. And after he went out the door, and I'm still behind Prabhupada and I'm just rubbing his back, Prabhupada said, "He is a big rascal." He said, "But I love him." That was Prabhupada. Anyone who did some service, he had so much appreciation and so much love for these people who joined early on. Prabhupada saw them. They helped him spread Krishna consciousness all around the world. They opened up all these temples. He didn't see faults. Prabhupada was not one to see faults. I know sometimes I would hear devotees say, I looked at Prabhupada and he would look at me and he could see all of my sinful activities, all of my faults, all my previous life. No, Prabhupada just saw this person who is Krishna's devotee, and how can I engage him in service? And he appreciated that service so much. So even myself, doing so little, Prabhupada was always seeing that I was provided for whatever I needed. And he wanted that for everyone. He wanted his leaders. He would say these positions, he said, aren't important. He said, understand the service, like the GBC. He said, you should become like me. And it meant in every way. So one of those ways was this Vaishnava care, to have these programs and these places. It should be our very source of life, is caring for each other, because we're family. We take care of one another. We see someone in trouble, we do anything to help them. This is what Srila Prabhupada did. Imagine, he took, it was tens of thousands of dollars at the time. This was 1972. It would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. Prabhupada didn't say anything. That's not what he was concerned about. He wanted him to come back. He wanted Gursundar back. He wanted to engage him in service. And he turned it in such a way, he said, what have I done? Imagine Prabhupada, the position of Srila Prabhupada to say such a thing. Who couldn't be melted by that? But at that time, 2 years later, it was so many things happened. It's so interesting. So I went 2 years later, I was the president in the Hawaii temple. And Prabhupada, of course, was here, Krishna Balaram Mandir. It was September 1977. Maybe it was the end of August. It was just before Prabhupada went to England. So I flew in Upendra was doing personal service, and I stayed for 2 weeks. I was so foolish. I thought I had important things to do. I thought Prabhupada would never leave, even though it was so apparent that he was going to leave. But anyway, I was here for 2 weeks. And when I flew in, just happened to get on the flight was Mudid Visa. Mudid Visa had been away since the time he mailed his danda to Srila Prabhupada. He mailed back his danda. And at that time in our society, so many rumors went around that Mudid Visa had done this and Mudid Visa had embezzled money. And Prabhupada was furious with the devotees. He said now he's been embarrassed and shamed that he can't even come back to a temple. So he was so upset that people were saying things about Mudid Visa after his leaving. He just wanted to see his disciples engaged in service. So somehow or other, we flew together by Krishna's arrangement. We were on the same flight to Hawaii to come to Vrindavan. Mudid Visa also, long hair, beard. This is what we Westerners do. We would fall down, your hair would grow out, your beard would come out. So we arrive in Delhi, we get to Vrindavan, Mudid Visa gets his head shaved, big sika he had in the back, shaves his head, shaves his face, and we go in to see Srila Prabhupada together. Srila Prabhupada was ecstatic to see Mudid Visa. And of course, right away, Prabhupada's lying in bed for months, not even eating. And he asked, everything is okay? He said, did you get prasadam? You bathed? He's concerned. He's there on his bed. He's going to be leaving in just a matter of weeks, but always thinking of everyone else, always thinking of his disciples, that they're properly cared for. And yes, Prabhupada, everything is good. And then he just looked at Mudid Visa. And this was the second time he said these exact words. The first time was with Hanuman 2 years earlier in 75. And he looks at Mudid Visa, he said, so now you're a grahasta like Srutakirti. He said, so just go on doing your service. Just like me, I was brahmachari, I was Prabhupada's servant. I was a grahasta, I was Prabhupada's servant. He didn't make these distinctions with us. He didn't separate us by the color of our cloth, by whether we were male or female. He just wanted to see everyone engaged in service. He said, so just go on. He said, do your service. He said, now go take prasadam. He said, take rest, come back. But he was so happy. And then days later, who shows up? This is 1977, Gaur shows up with his partner at that time. His partner at that time was Chandi. Prabhupada initiated her right on the spot because she was Gaur wife. Just happy to see Gaur come to see him. There was nothing to talk about other than he's again serving. He said, your wife, you serve nicely. He didn't care whether one had been sannyasi, left sannyas. Of course, it was important, but more important was to be engaged in Krishna's service. It was 75, I said it was the first time when Prabhupada was in Mexico City. He was there for a week. And of course, Hanuman, he had been Hanuman Maharaj, and then he left, he got married. And by the time Prabhupada got there, he already had a child, a son. And he was embarrassed, he was ashamed. Oh, Prabhupada automatically called, where is Hanuman? So then Hanuman comes in, very humble, embarrassed. He says, Prabhupada, he said, can I continue to do service? Prabhupada said, I'm not Lord Chaitanya. He said, Lord Chaitanya, he could make the animals chant and dance. He said, I need all the help I can get. And then he pointed to me. He said, now you're a grahasta like Srutakirti. He said, so just go on, do your service. So to this day, whatever is going on in my life, I understand Prabhupada engages us in service. And it's the only cure for whatever is going on, whatever we may be doing or not doing. If we just engage in devotional service, it's the cure for our disease. We see this over and over again. So that was Prabhupada's unlimited compassion from the very beginning, to engage everyone, men, women, boys, girls, this color, this country, nothing mattered. Same standard was there, engage in devotional service. There was another sannyasi. This was in 1976, and this took place in, well, it happened in 55th Street in New York. After they got that temple, of course, we know there was a Govinda's restaurant downstairs. So there was one devotee, he had been Prabhupada's, it was Rishi Kumar. He was sannyasi, Prabhupada's servant, excellent cook. So he had left ISKCON and he lived in New York. And all the, Prabhupada used to call it, he had a term, Prabhupada said, he used in Mayapur when you see the men, women talking, called the fish. He said to me, what is this fish? It was a term I never heard before. I've heard it once or twice here in India, this fish. What is going on? He said, this fish. So there in the temple in New York, all kinds of talk was going on about Rishi Kumar. Doesn't follow any of the principles. I mean, he's even eating. He's even not vegetarian. No one would talk to him because not only was he not following the principles, they said he's offensive. He's creating offenses to Srila Prabhupada. One of the things he was saying was before he became a devotee, he was in a rock band. He was a musician, playing guitar, whatever, singing. And he said, because I became a Hare Krishna, I didn't become famous rock star. And that was Prabhupada. Because of Prabhupada, he said, my youth I gave to Prabhupada. So he was resenting it. So most people, they wouldn't even talk to this person. There was one person working in the restaurant who would. It was a Mekhala. So she just saw he's a devotee and he would come to the restaurant to eat because, not even because it was prasadam so much, but it was cheap. It was a good place. You could eat as much as you wanted for a set price. So he would come there and take prasadam. And she would talk to him. She didn't ignore him like most everyone. You know, he's practically a demon. So one day, all the devotees are in front of the temple. Of course, New York, wide sidewalks. So everyone's out front chanting because Prabhupada's arriving from the airport. And the Mekhala's out there with the others. Sannyasis are out there. Tamal Krishna's out there. Adi Keshava's out there. Bali Mridan. Maybe not Bali Mridan. Anyway. Rishi Kumar's walking up to go to the restaurant. So of course he walks right up to her, since she would talk to him, and said, why is everyone out here chanting? He said, she said, Prabhupada's coming. Now she's already in anxiety. She said, Prabhupada's coming any minute. He said, I just came to eat. This was his consciousness. And of course, as fate would have it, as Krishna's arrangement, just as he's there, she's there, the car pulls up with Srila Prabhupada in it. And devotees run, they open the door, Prabhupada gets out, and the sannyasis, they see the situation that's there. Here's Rishi Kumar, long hair, beard. And of course, they don't want him to have to deal with this situation. So they're trying to guide Prabhupada. Huh? We would see these things sometimes. Prabhupada, of course, Prabhupada was aware of everything. Prabhupada knew everything that was going on all the time. So he gets out of the car. As soon as he gets out, he's right there. Rishi Kumar is right there. It's where he happened to be. And Prabhupada walks right up to him, looks him in the eye, smiles. He said, so, he said, you'll cook for me while I'm here? And as soon as he said it, the devotees around, I think, oh my God, he's a meat eater. How can he cook for Prabhupada? And they're whispering into Prabhupada's ear, Prabhupada, he doesn't follow the principles. And Prabhupada had a way, it would happen to me sometimes, you could speak to him, he didn't hear anything you're saying, he'd totally ignore you. And again, he looks right at Rishi Kumar. He said, so you'll cook for me while I'm here? And Rishi Kumar just melted. Yes, Prabhupada. He said, I'll cook for you. I said, okay. So what happened? He's cooking for Srila Prabhupada. And who's assisting him? The only person that even would even talk to this fallen devotee, a Mekla. She's cooking for Prabhupada. So this is Prabhupada. This is Krishna consciousness. This is what Prabhupada gave us. It's how he developed our society. He developed a family. He created a family where everyone cared for one another. And he was the head caregiver. And Prabhupada was the most perfect caregiver. And it was because of how much he cared that we were ready to serve 24 hours a day. I know back in those days, I joined 1971. And of course, we had the Hare Krishna mantra. Other mantras, another mantra I remember was love and trust. Everything was based on love and trust. You don't hear this so much anymore. But at the time, we understood, we served from love and trust. And of course, even to say that, first there's love. It's not trust and love, it's love and trust. First, you have to experience the love. You have to understand you're loved. Then you have trust. So this is what Prabhupada, we all had faith in him, complete faith. We trusted him, that he cared for us, that he loved us, and all he wanted to do was give to us. He wanted to give us Krishna. He wasn't looking for anything from us. And no matter what the situation was, we could always understand that was there. And again, to this day, for me, it'll be from the first time I met devotees, it's almost 50 years and just a few months. And I've had my ups and downs, but I always knew just by seeing how Prabhupada dealt with others, how he dealt with me. You know, I was his servant 2 periods. First time, 16 months as a brahmachari. And then I just, in Los Angeles, just left, got married, went to Caracas, Venezuela. 8 months during that time, Satsrup became his servant. Prabhupada, after having 2 brahmacharis that were his servants that got married in Los Angeles, he decided maybe he should have a sannyasi as his personal servant. So he made Satsrup Maharaj his personal servant. Of course, after some months, Satsrup Maharaj also became a little restless. He describes it himself in his writings. To be with Srila Prabhupada was very wonderful, but it was also could be a little difficult. Prabhupada was pure devotee. I always say he would use that analogy. You put the iron rod in the fire, it's in the fire, and what happens? It becomes fire. But I could also see with myself, if it doesn't become fire, if you're not ready to become fire, literally he burns. Prabhupada would burn you, because there was no opportunity for any sense gratification when you were with Prabhupada. There was nowhere for Maya to be. And eventually you go this way, you go that way. So I was with him 16 months, and then I was away for 8 months. Prabhupada again came to New Vrindavan, 1974, for the festival. And I just happened to be there. And I was kind of like Gorsundar, didn't even realize Prabhupada was right there. He had no servant. was an opportunity for me. I didn't see it. And Brahmananda was his secretary. And the day before Prabhupada left, just like the first time, the day before Prabhupada left, Kirtananda said, "Do you want to be Prabhupada's servant?" And I immediately said yes. So now it's 1974. It's the day before Prabhupada's leaving. And Brahmananda comes up to me, says, "Do you want to be Prabhupada's servant?" Instead of immediately saying yes, I said, "Well, where are you going?" Because all I know is if Prabhupada's going to India, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of India. I'm going to be sick. I'm going to get malaria. I'm going to get jaundice. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So I literally said, where is he going? Are you going to India? He said, yes. So then I thought for a few seconds and said, yes, I'll go. So then we went into Prabhupada's room. It was just like a carbon copy of the first time. Now I'm going in Prabhupada's room with Brahmananda instead of Kirtananda. And Brahmananda said, "So Srutakirti's going to be your servant." And just like the first time, Prabhupada just looked and went, that was it. No big ceremonies. And I joined him. And it would have been like I had never been away from him for 8 months. I assumed my service. I dove right in. He never said anything to me about while I was gone. What was it like while you were away? What's your wife like? Nothing. We just got into, he had his service. I became his invisible personal servant. And I went about doing my business very, very happily. And it was wonderful. We went right to India. And then he got sick in Vrindavan. That's when he got ill in 1974. Anyway, then it went on from there. So what time does this class go? Is it hour and a half?
It's an hour.
Okay,
yeah.
So we have just some minutes left. Okay. So there's one, I tell one other story about Prabhupada's unlimited compassion and how he dealt so wisely, so transcendental, because he had no agenda. He just wanted to see people be Krishna conscious. He didn't want to see people knocked off of their pedestal. He didn't want to see someone climbing over the other. He just wanted to see everyone engaged. So this happened at Bhaktivedanta Manor. And of course, then it was his GBC was there, who had been his secretary for a long, long time. And now he was GBC in England and stayed at the manor. This was very early. This was 73. So they had just gotten the manor. There were just a few dozen devotees there. So Prabhupada came. Rabati Nandan Swami was there at the time, and temple president, he was brahmachari at the time, just a devotee for maybe 2 years. So when Prabhupada arrives, again, there had been this talk, just like in New York, all the devotees were talking about the GBC not chanting his rounds. Everyone's saying, definitely not chanting his rounds. He's wasting money. He's renting these nice cars. There's hardly any money in the temple. That was a new temple given by George Harrison. So a lot of criticism was going on about this person. So as soon as Prabhupada arrives and gets into his room, temple president, along with Rabati Nandan Swami to back him up, go right into Prabhupada's room. And I'm sitting there, setting everything up, Prabhupada's desk. So then the temple president, he starts speaking to Prabhupada, and he starts criticizing Prabhupada's GBC, his disciple who joined 1967, the one who's responsible for this manor being there, the one who brought George Harrison. And he starts criticizing him. Prabhupada, we know he's not chanting his rounds. We don't even think he's following the principles. So Prabhupada looked at Rabati Nandan. He didn't even look at the temple president. He looked at Rabati Nandan and said, "Tell him to leave." He was so upset just by hearing the tone in his voice and what he was saying. He said, "Tell him to leave." He wouldn't even acknowledge his presence. So he got up and left. So Rabati Nandan, he was also earlier devotee. He said, "Prabhupada," he said, it's a fact. He said that everybody knows it. He said he's not chanting. Prabhupada said, he said, maybe he's very busy. He said, Arjun, he said he wasn't chanting. He said in battle at Kurukshetra, he said he wasn't chanting his rounds. He said he was fighting a war. He said, anyway, he said, that's how we should see it. Not that we looking for faults, just the very opposite. He said, and then he said, you can encourage him. This was Prabhupada's way, encourage. This is a family member. Again, this is a brother, this is a sister, their aunts, uncles, matajis, whatever. It's your family. Prabhupada always impressed upon me that everyone in his, under this umbrella, this ISKCON umbrella, we're all part of the same family. So our business is to help one another in devotional service. And the more we help others, just like everything, the more we help ourselves. The more you give Krishna, the more you get Krishna. If you want to experience Prabhupada, you give Prabhupada to others. This is the process. So I guess there's just a little time left. If there are any questions or something, Yasoda or Prabhu, if you have anything you would like to say.
No, we would love for you to say some more pastimes.
I was also the recipient many, many times of Srila Prabhupada's compassion. I never realized, he was always trying to save me from what I was about to do next. He always knew, he knew before I did what I was up to. I remember, and Prabhupada engaged everyone. But when I was brahmachari, I remember this was shortly before I was to leave him as a brahmachari. Prabhupada didn't preach to me. He would talk in such a way I never understood. It was completely directed to me. But I would think he was just saying things very nonchalantly about what was going on in the world and what was Krishna consciousness was like. It took me literally decades to understand. He was always trying to direct me, but he knew my nature. Whenever I did anything wrong, he chastised me. I never said I'm sorry to Srila Prabhupada. I would always try to come up with a solution. Just like when I knocked over the mustard oil and I had to turn it around. So I was like that. I could never say, I'm very sorry, Prabhupada, I'll never do that again. So he knew I had a certain nature. And I was very independent. When I left him the first time, he said, Kirtanananda. He said he got a letter from Kirtanananda when I was leaving him after 16 months to get married. He said, Kirtanananda has written, he wants you to go to New Vrindavan. Prabhupada didn't say to me, you should go to New Vrindavan, you came from New Vrindavan. He always understood me so well, exactly how to get the most out of even myself. So one day, as brahmachari, I walk into his room with his lunch, putting his lunch plate down on the table, the choki at a table. Prabhupada sat on a straw mat facing the wall. That's how he took prasadam every day, quietly by himself, honoring Krishna prasadam. So I put the plate down. in the time I put the plate down, offer obeisances, he says, being a brahmachari is an austerity. He said, being a grahasta is an austerity. You just have to decide which austerity you want to perform. That was it. Then he starts eating. I get up and leave the room. Now, I think he's just talking. I don't know. He's telling me he sees the future that I didn't see. He sees what's coming. 24 hours go by. I come in, I put his lunch plate down on the table. I'm offering obeisances. He says, it was more difficult to manage my household life than it is to manage ISKCON. And then he starts eating. So you put 24 hours apart, you just put those two sentences together, and he's telling me what I'm headed for. Now, I was with Prabhupada as he was managing ISKCON. ISKCON was not an easy thing. ISKCON, it wasn't a walk in the park. It wasn't a picnic. But Prabhupada made that comparison for me, trying to tell me what could possibly happen if I leave brahmachari life. So another time, it's the afternoon, and this I had been with him now for 8 months. And in the course of 8 months, I went from being very, very regulated, rising very early in the morning, like in New Vrindavan, chanting my rounds before Mangal Arti, doing service all day, to now going through my rounds on the morning walk at best, taking naps whenever Prabhupada took a nap, because going to bed late, getting up early, my regulation is shot, traveling around the world. Prabhupada remains regulated, but we would fall completely out of regulation. So he rings the bell, and I'm sleeping. I mean, I'm like knocked out sleeping. It's the afternoon. And he says, I go in the room, offer obeisances, and I'm trying to exercise my eyelids so I don't want him to see how sleeping I was. But he's already yelling at me. I've been ringing this bell for hours, he would say. Hours meant usually a couple of minutes or a minute or a few seconds, but he would say hours. And I sit up, and he looks right at me and he says, why aren't you chanting your rounds? And never, it was the only time I was with him. He said it, and of course he knew I wasn't chanting my rounds. And I had no idea what to say. And I'm sleepy, and he's just accused me of doing what I'm doing, not chanting. And I came up, I said, Prabhupada, it's very difficult sitting in this room all day long. That was my reason, is that I'm sitting in a room all day, so I'm not getting my rounds chanted. And it was the most absurd, ridiculous thing to say, because I had plenty of time to chant my rounds. So he just looked at me, and he didn't, and everything changed. He wasn't criticizing me. He wasn't chastising me. He said, I'm also sitting in my room all day. He said, every morning, you and I, we go out for the morning walk. He said, then we come back to the temple. He said, we come back to our rooms like that. I said, Prabhupada, I said, you're Haridas Thakur. I said, for me, it's very difficult. I said, just sitting in my room. So then he says, well, what can we do? He said, how to solve it. This was how he approached it. He was going to solve it. I had a problem, and now he was going to solve it. So what should we do? I said, I don't know. Call Kurandar. We know Kurandar. There was Prabhupada, there was Kurandar. He was the most famous, most wonderful. Prabhupada said, Kurandar can do anything. He said to me personally, Kurandar can do anything. Call Kurandar. So we call Kurandar. Kurandar comes in. I go out, get him, very serious U.S. Marine face. offers a basin, says, sit up. Prabhupada looks at him. He said, so Srutakirti's not getting his rounds done. And he says, because he's sitting in his room all day, and he doesn't say it like snarkily, doesn't say it sarcastically. He said just matter-of-factly. He's just dealing with the situation as I presented it, which is always what he did. If a person asks him 10 questions in a letter, Prabhupada answers from number 1 to number 10. He doesn't pick out what the most important question, what's not significant. He just, as he deals with things as it's presented. So that's what he did. So he looks at Karanda, what should we do? Karanda got a serious face. Then Prabhupada says, I have an idea. He says, I'm translating here every day Srimad Bhagavatam. He said, can you get another dictaphone? Yes, Prabhupada. He said, so you get a dictaphone machine? He said, you can put it in the other sitting room in LA. Prabhupada has the 2 sitting rooms. He said, you can put it in the other sitting room. He said, I can begin translating Chaitanya Charitamrita there. He looks at me, he said, Srutakirti, you know how to type? Yes. Yes, Prabhupada. He said, so every morning you can come in and you can get the tape and you can do the typing from the tape. He says, then you'll have some more service to do. He said, then you'll get your rounds done. He said, is that all right? Yes, Prabhupada, sounds very good. Okay, then. Immediately that same day, Karanda, boom, dictaphone machine set up on the table. I go in the next morning. On the morning walk, I'm chanting feverishly. I'm chanting my rounds. I'm thinking, I have all this typing to do. Because I had more service, Prabhupada understood me so well, my dilemma. He gave me something to do, so I became more serious. So I came in, I see the tape is there. We go on the morning walk. By the time in the car, on the walk, all my rounds are done in the morning. Prabhupada, after class, has his breakfast. I get the tape. I'm typing everything. I'm all happy. Prabhupada cares. He cared about me. That's what I saw. So then next morning, I go in. Nothing is there. But I'm chanting. Next morning, same thing. So just that one conversation, the one little tape in the machine, it saved me for many more months before again, I left him as a brahmachari. But he just wanted to see all of us engaged in our service. Just do our service, whatever it is. Everything else would be okay. As he said, just do your service. Prabhupada said, don't worry, everything will be okay. I heard these words myself over and over again by Srila Prabhupada. So I see it's just about 7:30. Want to thank everyone, particularly Yasoda Dulal, for giving me the opportunity, and everyone for giving me the opportunity, and for all of you Prabhus, Maharaj, if you're there, please forgive me for speaking. When I saw who I was following, I got very fearful. Following Giriraj Maharaj, Advaita Maharaj, I thought, oh, gee, Krishna. So anyway, Srila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.
Well, we'll still be on. Thank you, Prabhu. Srutakirti Prabhu, we'll open up in a minute's time. We will open up Zoom so that people can say thank you and Haribol to you. But before that, I will make a couple of very brief announcements. Let me share my page. So this is the wonderful, famous book, What is the Difficulty? It contains over 160 meditations from the private journal of Srutakirti Prabhu. It is assuredly a most nectarian book. You can just dip into it at any point and read it either from start to finish, or you can keep rereading it or read just an anecdote or two here and there. So I know you can buy it on Amazon on Kindle. I didn't see a hard copy available on Kindle. Do you know Srutakirti Prabhu?
I'm working with Maya Priya. I think Maya Priya. We're going to get it printed in the U.S. Getting things done here in India and going to the U.S. is just not practical at all. I'm working with her right now. We've just started, so we're going to get a printing in the USA, and then it'll become available there. Yes.
Wonderful. And then, Maya Priya and I are in touch occasionally, so I will publicize it so that people are aware that it's actually available again in print form.
Yes, it's been some time.
Yeah, it is a most wonderful book. My wife and I love it.
Thank you.
So on Saturday, as you know, the Bhakti Center has been doing a 10-part series, which just got over last Saturday. But we have 2 bonus sessions coming up this Saturday as well as next Saturday. And they are called Vrindavan Mellows, Krishna in Braj. And this coming Saturday, Dinabandhu Prabhu is going to speak some nectarian pastimes, especially about how Radharani dressed up as a Gopa and other pastimes of Krishna and Radharani in Braj. So that is at 9 o'clock in the morning on Saturday. It's 7:30 p.m. in India and 2 p.m. in the UK and so on. And you can see it, you can watch it on Zoom. It's on the Bhakti Center channel, tinyurl.com/Bhakti Center. And it's co-hosted also by ISKCON of New Jersey, along with some other centers. And on this channel, we have 6 days a week. We have speakers 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. His Holiness Jayadvaita Swami, he currently discussing Canto 2 of Srimad Bhagavatam. And as everyone knows, Jayadvaita Swami loves to field questions, and people do ask him a lot of questions during the discussion. And so it's a most interactive session. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, same time, 8 p.m. in the US. And as you saw on Tuesday, we had His Holiness Giriraj Swami. Today we have Srutakirti Prabhu. And on Sunday, we will have Gauranga Prabhu speaking to us from Govardhan Eco Village. So, and there's no session on Saturday as usual. So that is what is coming up on the Towaco line, on the Towaco channel. Now, before we open it up, I wanted to ask if Jayadvaita Swami wanted to say something.
Sure. I'd just like to thank Srutakirti Prabhu, such wonderful nectar. I couldn't give very much, who am I? But your class was just beautiful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
And there are lots of
Prabhupada's mercy.
For sure.
Yeah.
But you're the conduit.
Hare Krishna. That's all. That's amazing, isn't it? It shows Prabhupada can make the dumb speak. I'm definitely dumb. There's somehow others speaking.
So nicely. Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
So one thing I wanted to point out, Kamalini Devi, she attends this session regularly. She said she has one copy of What is the Difficulty for Sale. So if anyone wants, please send her a message on chat and she can tell you the details. And there's lots of wonderful
auction it off.
Yeah, exactly. There's lots of great comments on the chat, Srutakirti Prabhu. And please give our obeisances to Vishakha Devi. I know she's in the back somewhere on the side. So with this, we'd like to open it up to everyone to say Hare Krishna to Srutakirti Prabhu. Thank you again, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
I had another comment, if I could, because you were talking about caring for devotees. I just like to, that's not theoretical. I'd like to thank you so much for helping care for our Mataji there, Ishani.
Yes. Yeah, oh, you're very welcome. Yes, Maharaj. I know we have a team now. There's 2 people who are involved with her on a daily basis. And there are a few other devotees here. And then we have about 5 or 6 devotees here in Vrindavan that are being cared for. Maharaj and the Goshala, what's their name? Yasoda in the guest house. And I've gotten involved more with the devotee care here in the Vrindavan community, which is certainly going to expand in the coming years.
Yes.
And so yeah, it's a wonderful service, and I'm happy to be a small part of it.
Thank you so much.
And I'm going to put in one plug here for our wonderful temple president Panchagoda Prabhu, who's been here for 10 years now, and his service here is just amazing what he's done in Vrindavan. Those of you who have been coming back and forth over the years can see year to year how this place has improved so much by his he's a very good manager. And I'm not one to compliment managers very easily. I've left temples within a week if I don't like the person that's managing. So I'm happy to say him and I are good friends, and I'm very happy to be a small part of helping out here in Vrindavan. And hopefully all of you will come here whenever they open the place up. I can't say I'm eager for them to open it up, because until they open it up, we get to stay here because they just keep extending our non-existent visas. So we're just happy. I'm the person wouldn't even come to India, and now I just never want to leave Vrindavan. Yeah, that's a miracle. That's definitely a miracle by Prabhupada. Okay, I'm done speaking. Thank you all again.
Thank you. Devotees can unmute themselves if they want to greet Srutakirti Prabhu. Is that not? Are people unable to unmute themselves?
Thank you, Prabhu, for the class.
Hare
So
Krishna.
wonderful.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. I have your book. I read it so many times. Hari Bol.
Thank you,
Thank
Prabhu,
you
for
so
the
much,
wonderful
Such an
class.
excellent
It was
class.
a
Hari
great
Hari
class.
Bol.
Thank you for the
Dandavad.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Bye.
Krishna.
Wonderful stories.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Hare
Thank
Thank
you,
Krishna.
Prabhu.
Thank you, everyone.
Hare Krishna.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm Shruto. Fantastic. It was the best yet. Shruto.
Thank you.
Hari
Jai
Bol.
Prabhupada.
Hare Krishna.
Hare
Radhe
Krishna.
Radhe Hari Bol.
Hare
Krishna.
Hare Bol.
Thank you, Srutakirti Prabhu. One day you'll have to tell the story of why they call you Shruto. Can't wait.
Yes, yes. Prabhupada only
Thank
said
you,
it once, somehow or other.
Thank you, Prabhu, for the wonderful class.
You're very welcome. You're very
Hare
welcome. Thank
Krishna.
you.
Hare
Thank you,
Bol.
Prabhu, for the wonderful class.
We'll do it again someday.
hopefully
Hare
soon.
Krishna.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Bye. Hare Krishna.
Must not work.
Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki
Jai.
jai. Nitai
Jai.
Gaur Vrinda ki jai.